In honour of soldiers of all wars throughout history, today's special episode is a collection of actual letters written from the front during World War I. Letters from soldiers of World War I. Richard Gilson, letter dated 12th of May 1915, France. Born 20th of September 1887. Regiment the 4th Seaforth Highlanders, regimental number 2076 200415. Rank Acting Colour Sergeant. My dear mother, have just come through a particularly nasty period. We went into the trenches on Wednesday night, and on Sunday morning at 5 a.m. our artillery commenced bombarding the German trenches. And after 20 minutes had elapsed, we went over the parapet. My goodness, what a reception the Huns had in store for us. They simply swept the ground with machine gun fire and shrapnel. Poor old C Company caught it hot, and Neuve-Chapelle seemed to be a flea bite compared with this. It was found impossible to make any advance in our quarter, so I dug myself in and awaited events. It was horrible suspense, as I seemed to be the only man untouched. All around me, and being personally acquainted with each man made matters worse. In fact, it's all wrong to call them men, as they were mostly merely boys. About early afternoon I was hailed from the trench as to whether it was possible for me to get back. I replied in the affirmative and decided to run the risk of getting potted on the way, so I commenced crawling on my stomach until about a few yards from the parapet. Then I made a spring and rushed headlong over the top, nearly spoiling the features of a few who happened to be in the trench and were not expecting me. We were relieved that afternoon, but some of the fellows did not get in until nightfall, and these experienced yet another bombardment. Billy Hastings is quite fit, and the only pal left. We have been resting since and getting information about the next piece is illegible, but by all reports we shall be up again soon. No rest for the wicked, it is said, and if true, we must surely be a bad lot. What a terrible thing about the Lusitania, and with so many Americans on board, should imagine there will be more trouble. Have received box and letter dated the 6th, and am most thankful for everything you are all doing for me. Next part is censored. As regards the pads, masks of cotton pads which served as gas masks, all we were served out with were made on the spot, and consisted of a piece of gauze and tape that was steeped in a solution of bicarbonate of soda prior to discharge. I lost all my belongings except the Gillette razor, so should be glad of a few toilet requisites when next you are sending a parcel. Do not trouble about towel, and perhaps Frank would get me a shaving brush. Must now close. Much love to all, from your affectionate son, Dick. Letter from Albert Edwin Rippington. Letters undated, but from England. Born the 21st of November 1893. The regiment, the 5th London Rifle Brigade. Discharged due to injury November 1917. Albert died in 1982. Dear Ernie, thanks very much for your letter and kind wishes. My wounds are getting on all right, and they have discovered 11 in all. It's hard not to be able to get up, but I suppose a month will soon slip by. My people came to see me yesterday and the day before. You ought to see my face. They cannot shave me because I have scraps of shell sticking in, and as I had not had a shave for about a week before I was wounded, I look a pretty picture. Well, old chap, I'm glad I am wounded to get out of that hell. And if you ever meet a chap that says he wants to go back, call him a liar. If you could manage to come down at any time, I should be delighted. I've not received any letter from Dalton, but perhaps we'll get it later. That will be the time, old chap, when I look forward into the office on my way home. We'll manage to get a drink then. Well, I must close now, and I expect you will have quite enough trouble to read what I have written already. Hoping to be with you all. Your old pal, Rip. Next letter is from Richard Frederick Hull. Letter dated 19th of June 1915 from France. Richard was born on the 4th of June 1892 and his regiment was the 16th Seaford Highlanders in the 1st Highland Infantry Brigade. Regiment number 2161, his rank was Lance Corporal, and he died in 1974. Dear Gerald, many thanks for letter, which was somewhat a surprise to me. Now the news was quite fresh, as I do not hear from anybody in the office. We have just come from the trenches where we were for 7 days, and had a most awful time. We were 3 days in the reserve and put into the firing line where we took part in an attack and were also under very heavy bombardment. I'm sorry to say we had many casualties, 35 killed and 138 wounded, and I can assure you it was an experience I shall never forget. Anyhow, Williams, Kemble and myself came out quite safely. I have seen Frost out here. Of course his battalion, 8th Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders, are in the same brigade. Also, as a matter of fact, they were in the firing line the night we came out. I received a letter while I was in the trenches from Mr. Slater. Yes, I heard about Chamberlain. Jolly sad, was it not? If you do hear from Dick James, you might pass any news on to me. Shall be glad to hear from you. I could write more, only am a wee bit tired after 7 days in the trenches. I am yours sincerely, Fred Hull. P.S. Of course you know my address. Remember me to all I know. This next letter has no provenance at all, but it starts, Dear Mr. Welsh, we were only out here a matter of a few hours before we went into the trenches. We were there for 8 days and then came on to what is called a rest camp. I suppose it is called that to distinguish it from the trenches, because the men are at work all day on road and trench making, and it comes under both rifle and artillery fire. We got here at 7 o'clock yesterday morning and were shelled at 9 o'clock. In the trenches it was fairly bad. They are so narrow and smelly, and one is being potted at and shelled at all times. A turn of 8 days was really quite long enough, because it is strenuous work, and even when you do turn in for a rest, you have to be ready to turn out at once on an alarm. The country is really quite pretty, and just like the hills and valleys of South Wales. But there are no brooks or rivers. It rains hard for a month each year, usually about this time, and then there is no more until the next rainy season. But although it is so gloriously sunny, something is wrong with the place, and it really isn't as healthy as it looks. I think the flies have something to do with it as well as the heat and the still unburied dead bodies about. There are millions and millions of flies here, and they are all over everything. Put a cup of tea down without a cover, and it is immediately covered with dead ones. They are all around your mouth, and directly you open it to speak or to eat, in they pop. It's a game. We've all got nets, of course. We should have been worried. No medicine by now if we hadn't. We get plenty of bully beef and army biscuits, but bread and fresh meat is still a luxury, and it is not possible to buy anything. It must have been a no man's land, because there are no houses or buildings of any kind to be seen, and except the flies, the only living things are green canaries and lizards. We live in dugouts built up the reverse sides of the hills. They're just holes, really, but all the same they can be made very comfortable with a bit of digging and a few waterproof sheets. They're not shell-proof by any means, and the one I slept in during my first night here was knocked in completely by a shell pitching right into it. Fortunately, I was not at home at the time. We have another now, and I must try and get a photo of it and let you see what it's like. I also must send you one of our mess dugout too. Everything here is named after the regiment responsible for making or taking. For instance, the road we made from our trenches to this camp is called New Bedford Road, and the ridge we took and now occupy is called on the army maps Bedford Ridge. I have just been filling in and colouring my map and find it is one of the most, if not the most advanced line of the lot. Standing on that ridge, it is possible to see what a lot of country we have taken and now hold, but there is nothing to get wildly excited about. Each position is strengthened as much as possible before another attempt is made to push on, and the whole thing is just steady progress. Something might happen suddenly. I only hope it does. We have had some very big ships out here, and they have been bombarding the forts heavily for some days, and there are cruisers and monitors, etc., standing in the bay helping the land batteries to shell the trenches. You see a flash and then wait a long time before hearing the boom and the shriek of the shell passing over our heads, almost together. Then look round quickly and see the burst of the shell in or over the trenches, sometimes before hearing the explosion. The first we know of shells aimed at us is the bang of the explosion, and it is too late to get out of the way. 3 officers were laid flat on their backs the other day without any hurt except their dignity, and farther on 6 men were buried without one being injured. It isn't always like that, though. There is good bathing here when we can find time to go. As the beach is in full view of the enemy and comes under their shell fire, it would not appeal to the nervous. We never keep close together more than 10 yards when we are undressing and swimming, in hopes that the Turk will not consider one man's worth the price of a shell. We have had some casualties, though, through the men keeping too close together. But after washing out of a teacup for a week or more, it is worth a bit of a risk to get rid of some of the trench dust and smell and feel and look clean again, and really is the best bathing I've ever had. The water is quite warm and clear. All the hospital work is done on board ship that stands in the bay. If the cases are serious or lengthy, they are transferred to one of the hospital ships that calls daily and then go to either one of the bases or back to England. We land troops night or day in spite of the fact that they come under fire. So it is possible for a man to be on his way back wounded by the same ship that brought him from the base without ever having been landed. It was a grand voyage out. All the officers had either a stateroom or a first-class cabin, and the food mostly was just the same as we should have had on an ordinary cruise to India or Australia. Wherever it is that the cruise line calls, the usual cabin stewards and waiters were in attendance, and it was difficult to remember that we were not merely on a pleasure trip. We did enjoy those 2 weeks. Kind regards, yours sincerely, H. W. Cronin, Lieutenant. Charles Douglas Mayo, letter dated 22nd of October 1915, from Courtrai in Belgium. Born 30th of June 1893. Regiment, the Artists' Rifles, part of the 2nd Royal Scots Regiment. Rank, 2nd Lieutenant. Dear Father, I do hope you and Mother have not been worrying much about me, as I'm getting on all right. My wound is well now, and the broken bone is my only trouble. The 2 ends took the wrong turning first time, so a couple of days ago they put them on the right road again. I ought not to be left with a short leg, as there is about 40 pounds of weight on the end of it. In fact, I should not be surprised if it finishes off ahead of the other. One good thing is I get very little pain, except when I'm moved. Did you get my postcard? I haven't had an answer yet, but expect letters take a long while. I believe I asked you to send me some fruit, but as things take such a long while to get here, I'm afraid it would be bad. Besides, they take French money here, and as I drew £5 from the field cashier only a few days ago, before I was wounded, I'm quite well off, and the orderly will buy fruit for me in the town. I expect you're surprised to get a letter when I said on the postcard that I should only be allowed to write once from this hospital. But a fresh order has come out, and 1 letter a month is now allowed. Well, I've written quite enough about myself, I think. I am longing to get a letter from you and Mother. It seems ages since I heard from you. Have you taken a house in Uxbridge yet? Are you still waiting until Auntie and Uncle move there? I do hope you are getting a little more used to the lonely house. Please remember me to everybody and give my love to all relations. Next time you write, and tell them I shall like to hear from them if they would like to write, although I shan't be able to answer their letter. Have you heard about how Frank is getting on? I meant to write to him, but put it off too long. I expect my kit has been sent home, hasn't it? I am afraid your field glasses are lost, as I left my equipment in the wood when I was hit. I'm awfully sorry if they are, but perhaps one of the men picked them up. I arrive here with only 1 boot and 1 puttee. So will you send me a pair of puttees and a tie out of my kit? I shall be supplied with boots when I leave here, which won't be for a while, I expect. One thing I shall be very glad to get will be some books. We are very well treated here, and the Belgian sisters from the convent are very good and often bring us grapes or apples. I didn't get a very long run for my money, did I? It is rotten being out of the show. Not that I wanted the war to last long, far from it. but while it was on, I like to have a finger in the pie. But it's no good grumbling, and the best thing to do is to hope it will be soon over, so that I can come home to see you both again. Please give my kind regards to Kate. My very best love to you both. Cheers. Don't worry about me. Your loving son, Second Lieutenant Mayo, Charlie. P.S. I hope you can read this. It's very awkward writing lying down. You have been listening to Simply Stories, and I am Robin Coles.